we recording? Good.
Oh, thank you. Good. So it's now noon, and so I will slowly welcome back everyone. I can see the numbers are climbing up in terms of people joining us. I'd like to welcome back Bernd, and I'd like to just to say, because we have a little more time today, just to say while people are coming in. Of course, Bernd is the founder of Emergency Pedagogy, but also he's the founder and the leader, the director of the Percival Center in Karlsruhe. And if you go to Karlsruhe, you will see that those two huge buildings are right next to each other. One, the school is very large with a farm in the middle, therapy farm. And these children, I think over 600 children, Bernd, I'm not sure exactly how many, but they go from 7 weeks or so all the way up to 24. And you do see that it's in a way 3 schools in one. And it's a school where many, many children there have suffered land displacement or trauma or having lived with the economic challenges and all kind of challenges. Some children are there because nobody else wants them, or they have a choice to go there or go to a kind of boot camp. So to go there is a very big experience. It's a true world of school with plays, festivals, the enormous amount of therapies. And this school and Bernd together really inspired me to finally begin Kairos Institute, which is a school where we actually offer 2 trainings right now, both the art therapy training, but also, of course, traumatology with Bernd. And we have offered module 1, 2, 3, and now 4. And we cannot offer the next one until next summer in 26, which will be in residence when Bernd returns to us in July, early July 2026. And I'm not sure, Bernd, which module you will be teaching, but we can talk about that.
Of course.
If it's going to be 11 or if it's going to be 6, I'm not sure, but I thought maybe 11 because that's a very important one for educators. So anyway, I just wanted to just give you that because yesterday we were starting and I didn't get to tell you all these things, but it's a very big experience to go to this school and to have the feeling there. It's a genuine feeling of how would I say it, of healing work. And it's hard and it's beautiful. And on the other side, right across the path, you have the Notfallpädagogik Center, Emergency Pedagogy Center, where it's a beautiful center where you have, a center from where people go all over the world to do interventions or to do ongoing work, like in Turkey and at the border or in Ukraine, where they still are ongoing, working with the situation on the ground. So not all of them are acute, the interventions. Some interventions end up being kind of more permanent or more temporary at least, or not so temporary rather. So anyway, Bernd, I just wanted to say that because I want to do honor to you to make sure that I really share this with everyone, as we do have some new people here today. So welcome, Bernd, and welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karin, for this introduction. And I want to add that I would be glad to invite you all together to come to the Percival Center in Karlsruhe. We will have a big conference, the annual conference of emergency education, emergency pedagogy. It will take place here in Karlsruhe in Germany from 20 to 22 of June this year. And you can have all detailed information in our webpage. Also Notfallpädagogik, NFP.
I will put it in the chat.
You do it in the chat. That's fine. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah. So and there are the all details for was heißt anmelden for
registration.
For registering.
Okay, for registration. Yes. Okay. So let's start with our conference today. Ich spreche jetzt auf Deutsch wieder. Und ich möchte mich mal im Vorrein dieses Mal schon sehr herzlich bedanken für die Übersetzung, die meiner Vorträge, die bisher schon stattgefunden haben und heute wieder stattfinden werden. Das ist eine großartige Arbeit und eine schwere Arbeit.
great and difficult work. And I am very grateful for it, that we have this. I don't know who is translating. It's me, Margot. I'm interpreting.
Thank you so much, Margot.
It's a pleasure. We've gone on a journey together as part of education sciences to get to know trauma education. We've taken 3 steps. To start with, we looked at the ideas, concepts, definitions, which are characterize emergency education. And then we went on to look at how education is so necessary in a time where crises are on the increase. And we looked at how this emergency education, what it could look like. We talked about factual or basic competences that are needed. We will go through this again. And we looked at education. We looked at pictures. We saw fires. We saw first aid. We saw how to deal with death and dying, with grief. And today, in our last part, we will look at the helpers more. We will look at people who work in teams, working with psychotraumatized children in such emergencies. This will be the big topic, really, for today. Emergency, as we heard yesterday, are part of life. One cannot protect, or one cannot keep children away from this. And the big question is, the question we need to ask as educators, as teachers, as parents: how can we prepare children adequately for a life that will certainly have emergencies, and probably more in the future than we have seen in the past? We have seen this was our structure here. We have pastoral care, medical care, education. All of them have ways of preparing children for crises and to accompany them through a crisis. We've also seen that dealing with crises requires human basic skills or competencies. And on the other hand, it also needs professional, specific competences. The basic competences, they certainly include that we are able to develop abilities that allow children in crises to remain, to keep agency, to maintain their sense of self-worth, and to experience themselves as experience their own self-efficacy. And this is while they go through a disaster situation. We have a special word for this, which is called resilience. Resilience is the ability to thrive, to develop in difficult circumstances. We could say, despite difficult circumstances, to be able to survive also at a soul level, not just outwardly. And that is a task of education, to prepare this, to prepare children we could say it very simply. We could say it is the question of how can we make children strong for a future that we cannot predict. On the other hand, it also needs the direct, concrete, emergency-related competence that one know how to give first aid, how to behave in a fire, that we know how to deal with how to prevent accidents, fires, and so on. These are concrete tasks in education that we prepare children for such particular accidents and also to prepare them for avoiding them. We've seen this yesterday, a methodical approach that is not only related to emergency education, but to any kind of education. We have this basic principle of starting from doing, and out of the doing, one has experiences which can then be transmitted into understanding and knowledge. That's a basic principle of learning, which we know from the theory of the 7-year periods, which is very clear. In the first 7 years, we have the doing as the main point, which creates a basis for the development of the soul and later the spiritual development, which is to do with understanding and permeating. So this all is prepared in the very first 7 years in the activities. And that's a basic principle which in a trauma is shaken we could say about trauma education that it is built on these steps. The first thing I have to do after trauma is to create this original trust again, to give basic security. And this is something which goes through the body, because the body is a basis for our life, for our biography. Many aspects would belong here that have to do with doing, with activity, with physical activity. And this is the task of the first 7 years, creating this archetypal trust that is destroyed in trauma. And then the second big aspect, that is one at the soul level, which is about the reliable relationship, about relationships, because we know trauma destroys relationships. And that's why reliable relationships, building relationships, enabling children to form attachments again, that is the second big task after trauma. And that is, of course, the big task of the second year, the second 7-year period. Rudolf Steiner puts one word that describes this area: authority. It's imitation at the soul level, what we are talking about here. And with trauma, it becomes frozen and fixated and unable to function as the imitative forces do when there's trauma in the first 7 years. And if this basis, the basic archetypal trust and the reliable relationship have been re-established, then a third step can be taken, that of healing trauma. And this would be about understanding things. It would be about finding meaning, find a new home, find new roots, find one's place in life again, to develop courage for one's own further development and for looking forward. This is what happens in the normal development in the third 7 years. That's youth education. So all these foundations that we have before our eye, or self is born, they are destroyed and damaged in trauma. They collapse, and we have to build them up again. And the path that I have characterized, that shows us the way how one could do this. Now we have, of course, all these different specific emergencies where one can work with children dealing with grief and death, first aid, fire safety, traffic safety, all the emergency operations, first aid teams at schools, or school crossing guards, road crossing guards. But the question is, of course, also, how does one deal with sexual violence preventatively, as well as a secondary prevention if something has happened? And then, of course, with therapy, we had to exclude all these some of these individual things. Of course, we could work intensively on each of them, but we don't have the time. With grief and death, the problem is not in confronting the situation or dealing with it. The problem arises if I avoid, if I exclude it, if I make it a taboo, if I exclude children from a culture of dying, then problems will arise, not by children having to deal with it. What is important is how they are being supported, how they are being accompanied. It's important that one doesn't leave them alone in the situation. We also saw that grief is not the same as trauma, even though the processes can be quite similar, but there are considerable differences between the two. To put it in, to summarize it, is that the grieving process only starts when the traumatic freezing state is dissolved. Only then the necessary processing that we call grief work, only then can that begin. And children need to be prepared for this. One needs to go through the situation with the children. And we have pedagogical possibilities for this that we looked at, all kinds of art, enabling children to give expression to their emotions, their experiences, their thoughts, that if they can be expressed, come into a structuring process that can be worked through. Every form of ritual can help in this. Symbols one uses, one needs to create places for grieving. Healing stories can be told, the biographies of people who went through situations like that and dealt with it and overcame it. And always the mindful companion, the adult who is stable and mature, helping the child through this process. What does pedagogos mean in Greek? It means the leader of boys. At the time, of course, only the boys were educated. So a pedagogue was the person who guided the individual child or young person through their time of development. And this is, of course, something that isn't required throughout a grieving process. So this activity in saying goodbye is very important, and what is important as well is the community that carries this. Children need a stable adults, stable persons who can give hope. And particularly in anthroposophy, we have all possibilities really to understand things and to have a foundation, a soul foundation for accompanying children. Grieving, funerals, or laying out of the dead, how valuable are these moments? But today they are often turned into taboos, but they are so valuable as elements. If you've ever been have accompanied for several days the laying out of a person who passed away, you will experience this. If you are there in that situation and you see how the life forces of this person who is not suddenly gone, who is simply no longer in their body, these life forces that have left the body, how they are active and perceptible around the body, how they are reflected in the countenance of the dead person. What happens in the next 3 days in the experience of this person, how you can see in the face, not from inside, but like reflected from the outside, whether they go through phases that are difficult, where you can almost see a kind of cramped chin area around the mouth, or whether it was easier, all that you can experience in such a situation where, and children, they experience it even much more clearly than we adults if they are not put into a state of fear because of adults that are not stable enough. We can contribute so much from the knowledge that we have from Rudolf Steiner. We can understand, we don't have to just believe, we can understand it for ourselves. We can experience it. So the forms of burial for a person, depending on how they died, that can be meaningful. What is the right form of burial if you think about people who took their own lives, or people who died at a very old age? What is an earth funeral? What does that mean for the person, or a fire burial? What are the consequences of that? Where you can say the earth burial keeps the dead person in the earth for a while. It's a slow departure. It's a slow saying goodbye to the earth in the transition to the spiritual world. With the fire burial is much faster. The person, the individuality detaches much faster from the earth because the body dissolves quicker. And one can, of course, ask whether after suicide, is it good to have a fire burial? Would it not be better if that person who basically threw away their task in life, whether they could linger for a bit longer closer to the earth? But these are questions one needs to clarify in each individual case, because suicide, I need to say, has very different causes, and one cannot treat every suicide the same. It needs to be looked at individually. so that one can find the right consequences and actions accordingly. Dear listeners, this is what we did yesterday, and now we will look at our new topic, which is that of helpers, the intervention teams and their competences. It's totally impossible, you see, to simply send any person into a disaster zone. In order to survive there, I need specific competences and knowledge. If you have been in a disaster area, think of Gaza at the moment, think of Ukraine, or not all of Ukraine, but the area where the war is, or other regions, you will know survival there, also psychologically, survival to get through this healthily requires incredible competences. You see, what are these competences? They, of course, on the one hand, have to do with that there are standard rules. An intervention is not a walk in the woods, it's not tourism, there are rules, very strict rules, because only strict rules can guarantee or the survival of the group. So there are guidelines that one needs to know and that one needs to adhere to, and that is part of competence that I have to have in order to be active at all. Then there are different competences, basic ones maybe, or also specific competences where I need to be trained well. I need to keep training myself. So that is a very important precondition in order to survive in crisis areas. And the next, of course, is how do I put a team together? What kind of people come together for that? And how can this community be helped to have the inner attitude and preparation, but also have the social competences that are needed so they can carry each other and that they can survive together. If we look at these things, I have to point out again that every intervention is structured in different phases, and that's easy to understand, and that will give us orientation now. So this structure starts with preparation, goes into implementation, and then to a follow-up or review of the whole process. If we look at the preparation phase first, we could say there are a lot of points to think of in terms of content. It needs medical preparation, organizational preparation. It needs the choice of team, putting together a team that can go together. These are essential points, and we look at them now in detail. The first important thing is that there is a commission. What is this about? What do I want to achieve? Everybody needs to be clear about this. It needs to be absolutely transparent. then I prepare myself. Each person for themselves. If I know I want to go, then I have a task for myself. Then there are things that need to be organized. There are things that are organized for me, but there are things that I have to do. I read the newspaper. I need to inform myself what's going on there, what has happened, what does it look like, what about the geography, climate, the weather, how is the political situation, how is the culture there, what are the legal aspects? Is it different from what I know? These are things that I can study beforehand, before I go into a crisis zone. Then local knowledge. Where is it? Where am I going? Where is this crisis area? Is it a city like Los Angeles after the fire, or Gaza? Gaza City, maybe? Now I can study this place. Find out as much as possible about this place I'm going to. I need to look at the language. What do people speak there? Maybe I can even learn a few words, a few important words, to give me the possibility to, in a very rudimentary way, to be able to communicate. All these are topics that have to do with my inner preparation long before the intervention happens. Beyond that, there are, of course, organizational aspects to do with preparation. Very simple. I need to have a passport that needs to be valid for at least 6 months. I may have to have certain vaccinations. I might need a letter from my government that may enable me to do the work and to get support from the government in the country where I'm going to. I need a letter for that, and I need an invitation from the country. And I need to take several color copies of that, because sometimes you have to leave one of those invitations at the border. So it's good to have several copies of them. I need a visa. And I might not only need the visa of the country I'm going to, but I may need one of neighboring countries, because it could happen that on the way into the way in the country, I might not be able to get out again. I may have to go out through another country, because there is a crisis and things are not easy. This needs to be prepared. Otherwise, I can't get out when I have to. Insurance. If, as an organization, you go somewhere, it's essential that you clarify what happens if there's an accident, if there's illness. How is it if something is damaged? If you work with a child and something happens and you are being sued? Of course, it never happened, thankfully. But of course, one needs to be prepared. An expert said if a team has an accident, then this is most simple for the organization if someone died, because they're then being taken back home. There are clear rules what has to happen. If you have a 20-year-old with you and they happen to become paralyzed in an accident and they need to be taken back to their country, you will have the next 50 or 60 years, you will have lots of costs, up to millions. That person needs to live. They need medical treatment. They need maybe their accommodation changed because they can't walk upstairs, and so on. How do you do this as an organization? If you go by yourself, then everyone is responsible for themselves. But as an organization, in a crisis intervention, the organization is liable for the people who you take along. This increases the responsibility, and responsibility includes that as much as possible, you make sure that you are well insured. Problems will, of course, happen. Try and find an insurance that is open to you if you go to a place of disaster or war. Which insurance is prepared to do that? If they do it, what are the conditions? All that needs to be clarified in advance. You need to plan the route. And I said already there's a plan A, and there is a plan B, and there is a plan C. Plan A is very normal. You come, you enter the country and you leave the country in the same way. But if that way back is not possible, you need to have a plan B. You need to know how to get away from this crisis area if plan A doesn't work. You need alternative routes, and that needs to be all clear before you even start on your journey. You need to make sure what transport you have. How do you get there? By train, by bus, by boat, by car? If you travel in a car or with small vans, you need do you drive? Do you have a driver? These are differences. Or think of the accommodation. It needs to be clear, where will you go when you get there? Where can you go? How do you choose? From my experience, there is the possibility that you sleep in a tent. That happened quite often. There is the possibility that there may be hotels or other accommodation. But you always have to think of the health of the team. Depending on what life conditions you find there, people might get sick very quickly. They get sick very quickly anyway, because simply the sensory impressions that you have in an emergency area, they will affect your immune system, and you'll be more susceptible to. You don't even have to eat or drink something. Simply this, what comes in through the sense organs, makes you vulnerable. Where is your accommodation? Imagine what I like doing is book hotels, because that can give you a certain protection. It's not always the case, but it can be. Where is that hotel? Who lives around the area? What kind of area is it? Is there a police station close by, or is there any public building nearby? Then you have to be careful, because these are objects of attacks. What is close to you? If there is police, you may think that I'm safe, but no, it's the opposite. If there is the police, there are, of course, aims for attacks if there are attacks. So who lives in this area? What are the social situation like? What roads can you use, and which roads should you avoid? From when should you not leave your accommodation in the evening? Where is the next hospital? What does the next escape route look like to the embassy? All this you need to find out before. Who lives in this hotel? Who stays there? Is there prostitution? Is there any kind of business going on there? Are there conflictive parties meeting there? All this needs to be explored if you want to avoid danger. What state is the building in? Is the security? What is the staircase like? What about emergency exits? What about fire prevention? Is there an evacuation plan? What are the building materials like? You see, all that is important. We went to Lebanon with a group, and I was at reception in the evening with my leadership team. We made plans for the next day. Suddenly the light goes off. And then it comes on again, and then my phone rings, and somebody rings from the 9th floor and says there was a loud bang, there was an explosion somewhere, I think. And I said, can you look out? Be careful. She opened the door and says, there's a fire out there. And I said, can you flee? And she says, I would manage. And I said, run and scream that everybody can hear you. This is how most team members managed to get through the staircase, but 2 did not. They were on the 9th floor in their rooms, and they were locked in. They were on the balcony. We are well equipped. We didn't only have mobile phones, we had walkie-talkies, we had torches. They were up on the 9th floor on the balcony. The smoke went above them. But and now the fire brigade arrived. The Arab world, many fire engines came, lots of soldiers, police, ambulances, but they were all, it was a chaos. They were all running this way and that way. You didn't have the impression they have any kind of plan for getting people out of there. After 45 minutes, then the first fire engine with a ladder arrived. They extended the ladder. It went just up to the 4th floor. And I asked the person there if they had a longer ladder. And he said, yes, we have one, but it will take 2.5 hours to get it here. We managed because the firefighters just went through the fire and got our 2 team members out wearing smoke hoods. You understand? The state of a hotel needs to be looked at. It's very important also to have smoke hoods with you in such a situation where you may have a few minutes to get away. What rooms do I choose in a hotel? Next to the emergency exit, never on the ground floor, only to the 1st floor. From the 1st floor, you need to check the state of the doors and windows. It would be good to have a bathroom that is not connected with the outside, without a window, that's not on the outside wall of the hotel, which has electricity, and where you can establish an emergency camp. Of course, you stay in the room, of course, but everything that is important you put into the bathroom. Food, so that you can survive for a few days in the room. Water, first aid, medicine, everything in there. Your charger and everything you need. You must consider all these things. This is all part of preparation for an intervention. Also money. What kind of money do you take? How much cash do you take? What is the currency? And never show your money anywhere publicly to anyone. Carry it spread across different places on your body. always ever take as much as you need. And never tell anyone apart from your headquarters where your room is. Of course, the team members will know, but never any strangers. Credit cards, you need to check whether we can use them in that country, and be careful with wherever you can get money out of the cash machine, there is a danger that it gets stolen. Emergency phone numbers. Communication within the team must be clear. Everyone needs to be reachable all the time. We need SIM cards in that country. We need to be able to communicate. We have satellite phones so that we can get in touch with the headquarters at home. Don't forget the chargers. Maybe solar-powered ones. In addition to the ordinary ones, you need a world plug because they are different in other countries. You need to have communication with your office at home, and every day at an agreed time, a report will be given. And if someone doesn't call, then the headquarters have to look for them. That they have to find out, why is this person not getting in touch? What happened, and how can I organize help? And if there are crises, then this report will be every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, one will report where one is, what has changed, how is the situation. And it goes on. I need to know beforehand what I wear. I've got my working clothes. I need private clothes. What do I wear in that country? What are the cultural circumstances? If you are in Japan and you enter a ministry, or you are mayor, and you don't greet the flag, you can just go home again. If in an Arab country you put one leg over the other, then the conversation is finished. It's an insult. You need to know these things, otherwise you can have the greatest difficulties. And then there is medical preparation, of course. I should be healthy, really. I should not have started a tooth treatment, which in this crisis area could cause me a problem. I need to know what my allergies are, previous illness that could cause a problem, and so that I can be prepared. We need to have an emergency medicines with us, and a first aid kit. I need a team, and this team needs to have basic competences, each single one of them. And they also need certain specialist competences. I need a youth teacher. I need a teacher for children and for younger children. I need an educator. I know somebody who can deal with babies, or somebody who can deal with special needs. I need a doctor. I need a psychologist. I need all kinds of anthroposophic therapies that I can use. I may need someone who looks after my safety. I need somebody who can prepares the logistics. I need a coordinator. I need an intervention leader. I need a lead for the pedagogical team, for the medical team. All that needs to be planned in advance. And then I also plan my return trip. And this goes together. I cannot just travel to a country. I have to, at the same time, think of my return trip. I need to plan evacuation. I need to plan medical evacuation. How can someone who may have become injured, how can they get home? All that needs to be clear beforehand. There needs to be I've already spoken about alternative ways of getting back home. Of course, we have an emergency kit that is usually done by the doctor, the physician, but there's also a personal bag. We all have like backpacks for the service, and that they contain certain things, but that includes personal things like passport, visa, tickets, phones, chargers, and so on. So this is what preparing an intervention is like. And then one starts. Then the intervention can happen. I can't hear him. Oh, no. Yeah, now we hear him again. I could, if we were together in person, I would do that. How do we move as a group? It starts at the airport. You push your trolleys with the luggage, and you need a lot of luggage. Everyone has their personal rucksack or suitcase, but then there's also team luggage, boxes. How do we transport them? It's clear the organizers, the coordinator, they are there, they go first, and the team follows, not as one group. And if you have to stand, you have to be careful that your luggage doesn't disappear. This can only be avoided if you have a certain order. The trolleys have to be in one row, and this needs to be someone at the beginning and at the end who have an eye on the luggage. You can put the luggage in the middle and form a circle around it. In certain situation abroad, this will be necessary in airports to be sure that you get your luggage. And it's also about the safety of the whole team. How does one survive in dangerous areas? How do you arrive? Who's picking you up? Cars need to be there. They need to have been reserved or booked. If somebody picks you up, you need a code word. As a team, it's not so complicated as if you are just one person. If you go to a crisis area, you can't be sure that you're not going to be abducted. It needs to be clear the person who picks me up has a name or has a code word that has been agreed. We have exchanged phone numbers before and can now show to each other that we are the person that they are expecting. A sign with a name on can be problematic because often it happens that the one who wants to abduct you simply copies the name from a sign and stands a bit in front of the person with that name on their sign. So these are essential aspects that we are dealing with. A protected space, I talked about that. Accommodation, transport, we've done. I skip this. You have to be able to be reached all the time. There needs to be constant contact with the headquarters. You can, on your cell phone, you can save certain emergency texts that you can simply just send off if there is a crisis or an emergency. In countries, if you think of Arab countries or China, wherever you go, people may not go to big cities. The team may go to places where people don't meet foreigners. If you go to Africa, to a tribe, and there you can see that various things are really important. You need to know the culture. You need to have respect for the rituals and habits of that culture. You need to adapt your clothes so that you don't cause a stir due to your outer appearance. Think of the head coverings for women in some areas. Think of the tattoos that can be very problematic. There is a behavioral code, a code of conduct to do with body language, with alcohol, with behavior between the sexes. All that can be important and can cause problems. It's best you look totally innocent. It's best if you're not in any way conspicuous outwardly. How do I enter buildings? Religious sites. I've talked to you about the soles of the feet and in Japan that you don't show. When do you wear sunglasses? How do you deal with animals? All these things can become a problem and could ultimately destroy your intervention, make it impossible. Bribing, bakshish, it's also called. Basically, we can say no bribery, but in some areas, it is that tips are expected. Small presents or gifts are expected. You need to be prepared for this. Transport is also an important topic. In many South American countries, in Russia as well, you can't just use any taxi. You use certain services that are offered by the hotels. If you have a driver, you sit at the back and you don't start any difficult conversations. You always enter the car at a hotel or you leave it at a hotel or restaurant. You have to make sure you have the right vehicle depending on where you're going. You don't choose a conspicuous car. You make sure that there is central locking, that there is a spare tire, a towing rope, also a jump cable. And depending on where you are, you should have a car with air conditioning so that you don't get ill from the heat. All these things you need to be you need to be checked before. You need to have the right driver, and you must never say where you're going to go outside. If you go to the same place every day, you have to always take different routes. In Iraq, we once had an attack with missiles. We were in a wild camp where we worked. It was not a Kurd camp, but it was just a camp where people had come together. Half of thousands of people, half of them were children. It was just a wild camp. There were hardly any toilets, hardly any food. The water, the situation was really bad. And in the middle of this work with 1,200 or more children, we saw a missile flying above us. And a kilometer further, it came down into a field. A few minutes later, a second one came that flew past us on the left and went into a field there. Then a third one came that came directly towards us, went over our heads, and 500 meters on, it went into a house. It was clear to us then that it was certainly necessary to leave that place. And the army came, and we had conversations with the services there, and they said that was aimed at you. It would have been that it was their plan to kill 12 or so intervention team members. But someone in the camp had passed on the message when we would be there. So, and since this was aimed at us, we had to change our routes. So they could not be calculated. Also, the times when we would come to the camp, all these things need to be considered. How do you behave at control places, at checkpoints? They are not like in Europe or United States that can be just places that can be illegal, set up by gangs. They can be rebels. It could be an army unit that has gone out of control. So all this is highly problematic and needs a certain preparation. So you know how to behave if you come to such a point. Never travel in the night. Never take a train if possible. You will quite certainly, in a train, you will be robbed in the night. And if you are there in a team, you can make sure that the doors are locked, that one person is staying awake, watching. I won't go any more into the details about how do you behave if you are under surveillance. If I'm in Gaza, I will be surveyed. If I'm in China, and of course, there will be people of the Secret Service around who appear as drivers or whatever. You can be sure of that, depending on where you go. It's the same in Iraq. You are under surveillance, and you have to behave accordingly, which means avoid certain topics, keep to the laws and to your mission, which was registered. It's the same when it comes to whether you have a bodyguard or not. Of course, sometimes we have that, but the selection has to be done very carefully. A bodyguard can also be a risk, of course. This bodyguard can be, of course, be someone who has to do with an organization that wants to abduct you. Sometimes we say that having a bodyguard can actually increase your risk. keep away from weapons. Don't touch any weapons that may be lying around. Don't take firearms, because it can change your legal status. It can mean that the government can see you as a military person and treat you accordingly. Any physical confrontation should be avoided as much as possible. And fleeing is always better than attacking. Maybe that much. Another important topic is staying fit. Food is, of course, yeah, you have to make sure you've got good food. The team should really be able to eat well, but take care what you eat. Only drink from a closed bottle. Coke cans are best because they are a disinfectant at the same time. And avoid anything that has been used, that has had fresh water on it, because they are the two main sources that can give you an infection. Unpeeled fruit. Don't eat any unpeeled fruit. And be very careful with water above all. You should have a fitness program as well, and an anti-stress program that you follow in the way we've discussed again and again. I don't want to go into the details of this. I need to also make sure I'm staying within my time. We can have various kinds of natural disasters. An earthquake is different from a tsunami or a tornado or a campfire. These are basically different things. I'll just have a little excursus to an anthroposophical topic. We are connected with the earth. The fisherman and his wife, I told you the story where the influence of the soul life, of the human soul life, affects the earth, the ecological earth. The earth, I said, has the same organizational levels that we have: ether body, astral body, the eye organization. And if you look at the elements, earth, water, air, and warmth, you know that behind them there are elemental beings, spiritual beings, with which the indigenous people, who's in the olden days when the ether body was much bigger, they were communicating with these beings. And of course, you find the same within yourself. You have something that is like the earth, your bone system, for instance. And you have the watery element within you, as the earth has 80% of the body is liquid, is fluid. And of course, you have the air element in you. Think of all the cavities that we have in the body. Think of breathing. And of course, you have this element of warmth in you. You will feel it when you have a high temperature very, very clearly. But I just wanted to say that with the natural disasters, it's about the earth quaking, tsunamis, the flooding with water, tornadoes cause destruction or fires. They threaten people's lives. And what happens in nature when it, in such a chaotic way, has an effect on the elements within you that the outside corresponds to. This is why these natural disasters, depending on what kind of disaster they have such a different effect on people, attack different systems in us, causing disorder. And of course, there are rules, guidelines for behaving. I have to behave differently in an earthquake from a tsunami. And of course, this is something, if you go to an earthquake region where they keep repeating themselves in a weaker form, and again, even then, they will become quite strong. I remember intervention where we had to be evacuated from the hotel 7-8 times a night. You need to discuss beforehand, where are safe places? How do you behave in your hotel room? And the earth starts shaking. Where do I go? For instance, you have to open the door immediately. If the house just shifts a tiny bit, you can't get through. So open the door first of all. And of course, you have everything put under the door frame, your clothes, your bags, your helmet that you have with you. All that is in the door frame. And you will jump out of your bed, be under the earth frame, and get dressed, even if the earth quakes. Put the helmet on first of all, and as soon as it stops shaking, you run out through the staircase. Never go to the staircase before that. It's a dangerous place to be. So you can look at every room. Which are the carrying walls? Where do I lie down in order to be most protected if the house starts to collapse? So you need to speak about each of these kind of catastrophes and make sure you know how to behave. There are climatic extremes. How is it if it's extremely hot or extremely cold? These are different kinds of interventions. Or what is an intervention in the mountains like, or in a jungle? And how is it in a war? There are many things that one can look at. I won't go into each single one of them, but I want to focus on a few individual ones. For instance, if there is a civil war where I am, for instance, a question could be how to behave in such a situation. Of course, I can say I avoid gatherings of masses of people because they cannot be calculated. Things can change within a second. Best is to avoid them. Keep your distance. And that's not always possible. But if I can do it, I will try and do it. I think about it. Why do I go there? Why do I have to go there? Who knows that I'm there? What is the risk analysis like? How can I reach the embassy from there? Are there escape routes? If there are upheavals and I have to get through there, it's good to have a helmet, which is a part of your equipment, of course. It's good to have toothpaste to put them under your eyelids because it helps against tear gas. then it's best to be in road crossings, because there I have several possibilities. I look at houses before whether I could go into them, and I may have even spoken with somebody who lives there, introduced myself. I avoid confrontation. I avoid. I pull my head in when I walk. I don't run, but I walk, and of course I avoid a military look, because that would endanger me. I should know the exits from buildings, and I should, if possible, stay in the car if I happen if the car isn't attacked in particular. There is so much more to say. I've been so often in war areas where they worked with car bombs. One needs to have a hotel which has a car park, if possible, a lit up car park that is Words take care. Is there something suspicious around my car? Is there something at the door? Or is there something under the windscreen wiper? Is there any waste around my car? I need to observe this carefully. It's all important. These can all be suspicious objects that could have to do with explosives. If one is in a place that is fired at, you stay in your room. If you have a bathroom or without a window, then withdraw into that room. And if you have a bathtub there that is not made of plastic, then that's the safest place. Then you put your bulletproof vest on and lie down in the bathtub. And if you want to protect yourself even better, take the mattress and place it at the window. It will keep splinters away, also splinters from the window. And what's even better, but you can't always do that, it's better if you make the mattress wet, because then it is even more protective. All these things, dear friends, and much, much more apart from that, is part of the knowledge and training that you need before you can go into difficult situations and difficult regions. We haven't even talked about mines yet. I won't do it now. Mines are a field in themselves. We didn't talk about terrorized areas, what all the things that could happen there and that need to be considered. We've talked about car bombs briefly. Mass gatherings, social conflicts. There is a lot to say, and abductions, preparation for that, what happens if you are abducted, because that has, it depends on my psychological state. I can be prepared for that. I can develop strategies against it, but all this would be part of a training. What also belongs to the training is, how do I avoid being robbed, kidnapped, or raped? Or how do I behave in these situations? Again, there are many helpful indications as to how one can deal with things. And then you come back. We come to the last phase. We have 10 minutes left where we can talk about this last phase. Consider or imagine that you come back well, and but that doesn't mean it's over. You come back with many experiences. You probably come back with experiences that have changed your life. You have had impressions that other people, if at all, know only from television. That does something with you. You are traumatized. And that doesn't mean that you get sick, but you do have wounds in your soul. If you've seen in such a war area how the dignity of people is violated, that will injure you as a person. It will shake your basic convictions, and you need to deal with this now. I don't want to speak about trauma now because we've talked about it. We know those 4 phases of how it develops. But these first 2 phases, you will go through more or less intensely. The third phase, if your preparation and the structures of the interventions were done well, the third phase should not happen. But as I said, you were prepared, and preparation is prevention against traumatization. The more you know about trauma, the more you know about the situation in that place where you go, you are emotionally prepared, and the more you are emotionally protected. In Module 8, we will look in much greater detail at the preparations for in an intervention. We will see why this kind of preparation and implementation, because this is not tourism, this is something where you need strict rules for your life, but how all that contributes to the wounds that you will have in your soul, how that they can heal. When you return, you will experience something similar to when you went to the intervention. When you go there, the first thing is that you will be shocked. If you've gone through this field of rubble and you see all the things that have happened, it shakes you to the core. And when you come back, you will have that same experience again. You return into a world. You will meet your friends, maybe, and you will notice, what are they talking about? What are they? Oh, you know, they speak about football, a party they've just been to, and you begin to be bored. You say, because something totally different lives in you now. That's the shock of the return. This is one thing that you will experience. The question is now, it's very natural that you talk to your family and friends, and of course they will ask you, how was it? What did you see there? And you will tell them things. And this talking is part of the processing. We know this from emergency education. Speaking is a kind of processing. Of course, you also need to take care that with all these things you tell, that you don't traumatize those people. You know about secondary traumatization that can happen to the listeners. So you also need to be careful. What are you telling them and how? But basically, fundamentally, you could say these private conversations are part of processing your experiences. You can also share experiences with people who had similar experiences and interventions. You can give lectures. That also is a kind of processing of these interventions. You can write articles and so on. There are so many possibilities. Many come back and have acquired a ritual. They come home. I put my working clothes in the washing machine. I shower. I wash everything off. After that, I have a cup of coffee. Or I go out into my garden and look what is going on there. So these small rituals that I use to tell myself all this is over now, something else is now going on. And then there will be 4-6 weeks when, through talking with others or writing a journal or through filling in my evaluation form, which is also done so that I am that I reflect on things and process them. This is more or less what the follow-up phase will look like. If an intervention is good, you will meet after 4 weeks as a team and you will look back to the intervention together, and then you will be able to see how each individual, at what level of their processing they are. I can say that in 25 years, and I had myself, I was leading 130 interventions and many more took place, of course, that in all these 25 years, not a single team member was really experiencing severe trauma afterwards, not a single one. And that shows that the methods of preparation, of implementation, and of follow-up processes are effective, and that they are sufficient to be able to process the experiences. If there were problems, other possibilities would be there to use. For instance, the possibilities of supervision in individual case or as a team. And if there is more illness following, one could have psychological and psychiatric help. All this is part of the preparation program, but in my 25 years, this was never needed. Now we've spoken today about competences that concern every team. Of course, we didn't go into much depth, but I hope that you got an idea, an impression of what all needs to be done and how things need to be organized so that it will work out well. We will have a break now, I think, and then we will have a session, a plenary session where we may talk about questions or deepen things that you bring up. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you so much, Bernd. Thank you so much. It's a wonder to listen to you and to imagine and to feel into how much the human heart can carry, which is part of the story as well. Thank you, Bernd. And we will look forward to again at 9 Uhr your time. You will come back at 9, I believe. But we have a session with Alicia at 2 to 2:45. And then we have, so right now we have half an hour break And then we will have just 15-minute break before Bernd returns to us, and then we'll end the day with our Kairos team and USA team speaking. So this is what we're looking at for the end of the day. So thank you, all of you, and we'll see you very soon. Bernd, see you later. Take a good break. Bye-bye. Thank you, Bernd.